Mic check, 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
Well, we've just recharged our glasses with gin and French, and we're all gathered as ever.
You join us in the snug.
Certainly in the saloon bar.
We've left the saloon bar. We're now in the snug to talk a little bit more about Patrick Hamilton. And one of the things I want.
Hang on, though, John. We have Matt is. The Phil Spector of the operation is waving a gun around and saying, for God's sake, reintroduce our guests. So it's me, it's John Mitchinson, it's the excellent novelist Lissa Evans, the excellent novelist and short story writer Stuart Evers.
And
hello, guys.
Oh, hello. Sorry.
The subject of the conversation.
I was a bit gin and French there for a moment.
The subject of the conversation is the excellent, brilliant novel by Patrick Hamilton, The Slaves of Solitude. And we've charged our glasses. We're gonna give you a bit of extra Hamilton kind of insight or whatever this passes for. What I wanted to say is that the amongst the many pleasures of this book, and they are, as you will know if you've listened to the rest of it, many, it's surely the greatest Christmas scene. We're talking about Hamilton as a Dickensian writer. The chapter 18 opens with this memorable sentence: that Christmas of hatred, fear, pain, terror, and disgrace. And then later on he says about something about Christmas. He said, the madness of Christmas is not to be resisted by any human means. It either stealthily creeps or crudely batters its way into every fastness of fortress of prudence all over the land.
And what I love about that scene is the attention to detail where they wouldn't ordinarily be allowed to drink in the lounge, but it's all right because he's brought some gin and orange.
And Mrs. Payne gets quite into it. The landlady gets quite into it.
I quite like the idea that Patrick Hamilton invented gin and juice, the Snoop Dogg song. I like that. I like the idea that Snoop was reading.
Rolling down the strip.
Yeah, and reading Patrick Hamilton. And thinking gin and juice.
I just want to. I haven't read anything from the Slaves of Solitude yet. I just want to read the opening because, as openings go, even the opening is superb, right?
You see, I'm going to have to take issue with that. But go on, you go ahead.
Ooh. Chapter 1. London, the crouching monster, like every other monster, has to breathe. And breathe it does in its own obscure, malignant way. Its vital oxygen is composed of suburban working men and women of all kinds, who every morning are sucked up through an infinitely complicated respiratory apparatus of trains and termini into the mighty congested lungs, held there for a number of hours, and then in the evening, exhaled violently through the same channels. I've just watched, incidentally, listeners.
It's just terrible.
I've just watched Stuart vaping in time to that particular exhalation. Do you think that's terrible?
Oh, it's awful.
I think he's just taking his metaphor too far.
But
I know, but
this is
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first time I know we get told off, indeed rightly, for not finishing our sentences and overusing breathless hyperbole on this shoot, but I don't think we've yet had a bravura moment on Pat.
You know what it is, don't you, John? It's a tour de force.
It's the gin in it, mate.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
That's what it is.
No, but I think this. I'm glad that you brought it up because
Talking of tired old locutions, Stuart, I'm very glad you asked me that question.
Because I think that is a perfect example of Hamilton being a good novelist, a great novelist, but not a particularly great writer. Because actually, I do think it's completely overwritten, and it goes on and on and on. This whole kind of
he's read the fog chapter of Bleak House.
Yeah, and it's a bit this big metaphor of blowing people in and blowing people out. But what is fascinating about it is that what it does, even though it's a very crude instrument, what it does give is the idea of London as a living, breathing, physical, actual with life in it. And what it brings out is when the people are actually spat out down into Thames Lockton, is this sense that when you get there, that you realise that all life has ended here. That this is an unliving space, a place of hiatus, if you like. And that all of these characters are just stuck in this horrendous place. And I think that even though I think it's overwritten, I can see why it's there, because it needs to be there to show that life is elsewhere and they are stuck in this unliving place. And I think what I found fascinating is about this novel, and I think Richard Curtis should really read it.
Oh my God.
because in Richard Curtis, or any kind of
8 actually,
but he but in any of those kinds of romantic comedies, the Americans arrive and they are witty, they are clever, they are different, they are full of life. But this American, this lieutenant, I find him fascinating.
Dead.
He's dead inside, and his dream is laundry. That's his dream, and it's the smallest possible dream.
Absolutely.
And there is no content to his conversation whatsoever. It's empty.
And he is a proper, genuine alcoholic. Like the other people drink, but he
has to keep going. He has to keep, and there's always another drink.
And when it comes out later that he's even more nefarious than it says, I actually don't feel bad for him. I just kind of want to give him a cuddle and say, your life is terrible, and they kind of excuse him. Because they excuse him, like,
You're so nice, Stuart.
but he is excused. I mean, not Vicky, but Miss Roach excuses him consistently by saying, he's inconsequential, or, well, there's the second front coming up, and he's got the shadow of war. But as the book goes on, more and more, there's more and more stuff about the war. The war is mentioned more and more. And this is as we said, this is a war novel. Like let us not be. This is
the war is clear.
And he is clearly terrified, not only about the war and possibility of not living through it, but also of going back and being this laundry.
And this bladder of lard is going to be on the beaches in a year. That's the most extraordinary thing.
The second front, and I love the way he brings in that thing of exactly that. Miss Roach feels sympathy for him, and then there's that sense that she goes back to London, and then the bombing is going to start again. But I tried to find, because I read this thing, Andy, that you'd said about the whiskey. I tried to find some drunk writing in the book, and I think I found only. This might be brilliant, or this might be bravura, or this might be just overblown. Tell me what you think. What do you think is going on here? Miss Roach looking at the countryside. At such moments, the countryside, stealthily informing her of its immense size, would seem, of course, in grandeur, wildness, and stillness. This is Henley-on-Thames, right? Completely to dominate and submerge all things appertaining to men and towns, and to reduce in particular to microscopic thread-like smallness the railway tracks by which these communicated with each other, the noise of the trains thereon distantly falling on her straining ear like something less than minute rumblings in the enormous belly of the enormous supine organism enveloping her and everything.
It's almost no excuse for using the word thereon.
But no, by this adjustment of her sense of dimensions, Miss Roach's spirit, bathed in moonlight, would be composed, consoled, and refreshed. And then she says, the train, on the other hand, which Miss Roach normally took down from London to Thames Lockton, had opposite ideas. So far from being aware of its doll-like magnitude in the night, of being diminished practically to the point of extinction by the surrounding void of fields, woods, and hills, it came crashing on like a huge, staggering bully from station to station, lashing out right and left at the night, on which the tables were turned, which was itself relegated to nothingness, and whose very stars had less importance in the eyes of the train than one of the sparks from the funnel of its engine. In the same way, Miss Roach's attitude was
really good book.
Completely reversed, and when at last she alighted at Thames
really
Lockdown Station, instead of feeling composed, consoled, and refreshed, she was invariably filled with anxiety, apprehensive.
I'm closing the book now, so that
that is a terrible passage.
And yet, no, hang on. But that is this close to truthing. You know, like it's this close to Thwaites, isn't it? It's this close.
But also the energy of it. What I like about Hamilton's prose, even when he's not afraid to be gauche, you know, he's not afraid to really try and push through that barrier.
He uses disinterested as well.
But you see, for me, those bits, I've forgotten those bits.
Yeah, me too.
They haven't been in my head at all. I think, bloody hell,
all I mean is a man with a bottle of whiskey at night, and he's writing about trains, and he's right. I mean, Lord knows what the editorial process with Hamilton.
Now, the editorial. Funny you should say that. Now, earlier on, we were talking about whether the titles of Patrick Hamilton's novels were any good.
And I thought they were brilliant.
And what do you think, Stuart?
Well, I think they fall into two categories. Hangover Square, genius. Right?
Yeah.
Hangover Square, I want to read that book. Slaves of Solitude, not so much.
No.
What does it sound like an 80s kind of, album, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's the Lost Bunnyman album.
Yeah. Craven House, great title.
Okay,
wonderful.
so most...
but the worst, Tuppence Coloured.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
That would have meant something to him. It means nothing to us, but Tuppence Coloured would have been significant.
Tuppence means female pudenda as well as tuppence.
Yeah. Oh, blimey, I wasn't thinking of that.
No, I'm just...
Does it?
Yeah. Sorry.
This is why this is like After Dark for the show.
I was thinking it was
Press your red button now.
Pictures.
So most of the titles of Patrick Hamilton's novels were not devised by Patrick Hamilton. Get out of here. No, it's true.
I'll go to the foot of my stairs.
Yeah.
Okay, they were devised by his editor, and his editor is a man who deserves his own episode about this. He's a man called Michael Sadleir. Have you ever heard of him?
Oh, yeah. Well,
so Michael Sadleir was the publisher at Constable, and he would often... His editorial letters will often say, Patrick, I love the book. Just one thing, need to change the title. Okay, so he often devises the titles for the books. The thing that is one of the significant things about Michael Sadleir, do you know who else he was publishing at the same time he was publishing Patrick Hamilton?
So where are we? 20s?
Constable, late 30s.
Constable, late 30s.
Priestley.
Nope.
Good guess.
Stu?
Orwell's Gallants. Too early for Green.
Let's just say somebody who wrote about drinking and could be quite a handful.
Dylan Thomas.
I'm afraid not. He was Gene Reese's editor.
Gene Reese!
Oh my God!
Really?
Gene Reese's editor.
He must just had his hand the whole time.
Gene Reese's editor on Voyage in the Dark.
Easy Christmas presents for your clients, though,
and Good Morning Midnight. Good Morning Midnight, which we've done on the podcast, of course. And I was going to say to you, Joe, can you imagine the lunches? Oh, no. Looking at your diary and thinking, you've got Patrick Hamilton on Wednesday and Gene's coming in on Friday.
What a fantastic thing. Can you imagine that now?
Oh.
But what were his titles originally? Do you know what any of the
Well, they're in Nigel Jones's book, but I do know that Craven House was Sadleir's idea. Definitely. But I think Slaves of Solitude was Hamilton. I think Hamilton told
it's in the book, isn't it? But
it's a sort of terrible title.
It is. And it's not as bad as Tuppence Coloured, but...
It's both portentous and it gives you no feeling for the characters at all. Time now for an advert.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
No, not at all. I mean, I don't know. Could you have called it Miss Roach? Probably not.
But
Roachy, Enid.
Enid. But that's made me think how brilliant Muriel Sparks titles always were.
And Slender Mean.
The Abbess of Crewe. What a great title that is.
And a far cry from Kensington. It's
so there's another thing here.
The driving seat as well. I mean,
there's another thing here I'd like to say about Patrick Hamilton. This is wonderful. This is reproduced in Nigel Jones's book.
Everybody should read that. It's an amazing. I mean,
brilliant biography called "Through a Glass Darkly: The Life of Patrick Hamilton" by Nigel Jones, and he includes this letter. This is very Hamilton. He really didn't like abroad.
No, he didn't.
Right? He really didn't like to be anywhere other than
He didn't
England.
like the French. He didn't like the Germans.
Here's his letter to his brother Bruce. Bruce, who loved France.
Yeah, that's so sweet.
Here is his 11-point letter about their trip to France. We went to Paris, Dijon, and Auxerre. Paris, I think, is the filthiest and most loathsome city in the world. I absolutely hate it from every point of view. I have a list of the things I hate about it. 1, the dirty, filthy smell of the place. The cheap, restauranty, omelette-y, high-life, cigarette-y stench which greets your nostrils at and between every corner.
Oh my
2,
God, so good.
The revolting advertisements with which the whole place is plastered. A picture of a lewd, fat, smiling baby. 3, the peeling, grey, debauched rottenness of the slummier quarters. 4, the obscene, gurgling language which, italics, I can neither speak nor understand. And when they hear you fumbling with it, they haven't 1/8 of the sympathy which an Englishman would have for a Frenchman in the same predicament. They look angry and indifferent. 5, the Americans. Everybody will tell you that Paris is completely spoiled by the Americans. Well, if it is spoiled, what is the use of going there? 6, the French. 7, the hashed, buttery cooking, invented for a people with enervated appetites which require tickling and are absolutely opaque to the subtleties of plain food. 8, the coffee complex. I cannot digest coffee. I loathe French bread, and so I feel slightly sick for the rest of the day. 9, the horse traffic. And then there's a long bit I won't read you about just ranting about horses. 10, the noise, the amount of cobbled stones and drays and incessant sharp shriek of the taxi horns. Finally, 11, the fact, this is an unreasonable objection, but nonetheless real for me, that all the traffic is going the wrong way and much too fast.
Do you know what?
He'd get a series now, wouldn't he? Going around the world. Yeah.
Isn't it? Eh? Yeah.
It does sound like a conflagration between Nigel Farage and Geoffrey Boycott. It just feels like they've got together. It's like a 10-point manifesto.
This is also the point about. This is the thing which is what I love so much about fiction. He can write Mr. Thwaites because, of course, he in some ways is Mr. Thwaites. And that's what I love about that.
Can I do a bit?
Go on, you got to do it.
Okay.
Go on, listen.
Okay, fine.
We just have to have a bit more Thwaites.
We'll have a bit more Thwaites. Okay. Well, one phrase which he uses quite a lot is, I keeps my counsel. Like the wise old bird. I happens to keep my counsel. I happens to be like the wise old bird. And then later on he says, I hey my doots. That's all, says Mr. Thwaites. I hey my doots. And he is not, thought Miss Roach, going to add, as the Scotchman said, is he? Surely he's not going to add, as the Scotchman said. As the Scotchman said, said Mr. Thwaites, yes, I hey my doots.
Brilliant. Yeah, so I've got two things to add, and then we'll wind up. But the first thing I'd like to add is we normally have clips on Backlisted of the authors talking or maybe interviewed, and as far as we know, there is no audio of Patrick Hamilton talking, but I would like to recommend, there's a wonderful series on YouTube called Cummings Your Way, in which a gentleman, I believe called Cummings, maybe not, goes to a variety of towns and wanders round them and gives a little narration while he does it. The one about Patrick Hamilton and about Brighton is by far and away the best thing about Patrick Hamilton on YouTube. It's only 15, 20 minutes long. If you're listening to this and you like Patrick Hamilton and you love things that are English in a sort of either cutlery, although he wasn't English, Betjeman-y kind of way, Cummings Your Way on YouTube. Just look for Cummings Your Way, Patrick Hamilton, and you'll find it absolutely tremendous. I would like to ask everybody around the table, John, you've already said that this might be the book you've enjoyed most of any that we've done on Backlisted. I said at the top that I felt it was sort of Patrick Hamilton was the ultimate backlisted author. Why is it then that Hamilton remains perceived, I think, as a cult writer rather than a mainstream writer? He is not talked of in the same breath as, say, Graham Greene and George Orwell, unless it's to say he's often thought of not quite as good as Graham Greene and George Orwell. But why is he perennially underrated?
I think because his focus is so small. I think because he's looking under the microscope. I mean, Orwell wrote about small, ordinary things, but he also had to look at his range. It was absolutely extraordinary. Patrick Hamilton's looking at one type of people, one type of person in one type of place.
I think you said it earlier, Andy, when you said he was a limited writer. I hate to feel, because I love this book, I mean, it's been a total revelation to me. But I think he is a rebarbative human being. He's quite hard to like. You can feel that Hamilton would have been a difficult person. We don't agree on this, but I always feel I could have met D.H. Lawrence and kind of, we could have had a
A naked wrestle?
No, not a naked wrestle, but we could have. Hamilton, I just feel Hamilton was he was a major league fuck up, but the best of him went into his books, and I think the best of Hamilton is in this book.
I think, for me, the reason why he's perennially a cult writer or an under the radar writer in that respect is that he fell at the wrong time.
Yeah.
That his subjects were, like Hangover Square feels quite dated when you compare it to, say, if you are in the late 50s and you've got the kind of angry young men and women, people coming in the late 50s, early 60s. He's under the radar. He's under the radar for most of that time, and yet he's actually the precursor for those writers. Those writers that, with Patrick Hamilton, I think that when I first started reading Hangover Square, like the very first book of his that I read, I felt in the company of the kinds of people like Keith Waterhouse, John Brain, those kinds of writers who had meant so much to me in my mid to late teens, because they were talking about people that I understood, that I knew. They were in a space that made sense. And, and Kingsley Amis, for me, I mean, like, it's not just rich people I struggle to read about. I mean, campus novels I have a massive problem with. But again, Hamilton occupies two things which put him out of disadvantage. He writes about ordinary people who are not necessarily just in the gutter yet, and yet aren't rich or anything like that. But also the timing, like people do people want to read about the war when there isn't a sense of impending loss, even though that this book actually does do that very well. I think that there is an issue there where he's writing about the boring mundanity of living under an oppressive regime and this kind of sense of fear. And this is why this book, actually reading it again now, feels so contemporary and many ways.
I agree.
Thwaites, for example, you could go anywhere in this country, and I go up and down the country regularly, go to smaller places, not cities but towns and places all around the UK, and you hear Thwaites everywhere, trothing. Even trothing.
I think the thing. That's a really good point, Stu. I would like to add one thing to this, which is that, as someone who is fascinated by the sort of ebbing and flowing of reputations and the nuances of where authors fit in the general picture at any given time. I never get tired of thinking about this. And I was thinking back to when I started as a bookseller in the early 90s. And I was thinking about how much I loved, and indeed still love, Graham Greene. You know, Graham Greene was a very important writer to me when I was young. And I was thinking that what's so interesting about Patrick Hamilton is he was actually, you know, he was a successful writer in his lifetime.
Really was.
He was well reviewed and widely read, and his books sold. And by the mid-60s, he was forgotten. Greene, who was still alive when I worked as a bookseller, was, through his lifetime, considered one of the preeminent British novelists of the 20th century. I would be fairly sure that here in 2017, Patrick Hamilton is now more widely read than Graham Greene. I've got no way of proving it. I feel in terms of a writer who's referenced and talked about.
I hope that's true, because I think
you'd be surprised.
I mean,
No, not even close.
I'm going out on a limb, and we haven't done backlisted on Greene, but all Greene's books are disfigured by Catholicism.
I can't wait till we do Greene, because I will be disagreeing with you.
No, I disagree.
I would lay money down. I'll lay down 50 quid.
All right.
I will lay down
really
50.
mean.
I will lay down 50 quid that the End of the Affair and The Power and the Glory together have sold more than all of Patrick Hamilton put together, all of his stuff over the last 4 years.
I've got the stats on my phone here.
No, you haven't. You have not.
I'm afraid you're wrong. I'll take your money.
I'm afraid
The truth is,
Bookscan is not. Bookscan it's not on your phone. It's not on your phone. I know this. I've been through your phone. I did have a point to make about Patrick Hamilton. Many years ago, in Select magazine, my magazine of choice during the early 1990s, there was a review of Dogman Star by Suede. There is the line in it, and I always think about this whenever I think about cult writers or whatever. The line was, when people have forgotten whether Smashing Pumpkins were animal, vegetable, or mineral, there will always be someone late at night with their headphones on listening to Dogman Star. And I always always think that that's kind of the case, and I think that's where Hamilton fits in perfectly, is that he will never be in the same rank as Greene or Orwell, but there will always be someone late at night reading Patrick Hamilton.
I think that's a love. It comes back, you know, Andy, your love for absolute beginners. There are just some writers who get things, and the thing about Hamilton, what I feel about him is he fixes something more perfectly, and there's no other writer who can do what he does. And yet somehow it's like the brilliant line that Russell Hoban once said. He said, you know, my readers trade in used paperbacks. If you love Russell Hoban, you give your copy of Russell Hoban to somebody else. I feel that's it. You know, that bookseller kind of telegraph we have is when you read a Patrick Hamilton novel, you say, you've got to read this.
Yeah.
And yet somehow Graham Greene is up there as a settled star in the literary firmament. I don't think Hamilton ever will be.
Well,
We don't need him to be.
We don't want him to be.
Let's raise a glass
Under the counter.
we're going to raise a
Under
glass
the
to
counter.
both Patrick Hamilton, to Backlist, and all you lovely people for listening through to the end of this. We'll see you next time, somewhere down the road. Oh, in fact, are we still going?
Yes.
God help us. God help all of us. Everyone, all of us. The end.
The end.
It's kind of anti-Tiny Tim, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
If you prefer to listen to Backlisted without adverts, you can sign up to our Patreon. It's www.patreon.com/backlisted. As well as getting the show early, you get a whole 2 extra episodes of what we call Locklisted, which is Andy, me, and Nikki talking about the books, music, and films we've enjoyed in the previous fortnight.